For today's beading lesson, I thought we'd take a few minutes to just look at our workspace. You know, you want to work with the maximum efficiency of space as you can so that you're really using your space as well as you can and also beading for as long as you can. And one really important thing to make sure you have is good lighting. So these are a couple of options for lighting. This one reaches over your workspace so that you can use your full spectrum light for color matching, for high contrast. This is really bringing the daytime inside by using a light that resembles the outdoor sunlight. Now, if you're working with a magnifier, it's good to have one that also has a light and one that has two different types of magnification in it. So you have your basic magnification, and then if you have an inset, that even gives you some extra optimization when you're working. So these are things that are going to prevent eye strain so that you can work longer in your life and also during the day. So that when you're beading in the evening, especially if you have a long day, you're just kind of hanging out working, make sure that you have some good lighting when you're working. So another really important thing to think about is your organizing. And when you're storing and organizing your beads, it's nice to have them by color. I like to keep this one on my work table because it's really inspiring and I can easily see which colors I need. And you can see that all my little containers are full to the max. It's nice to be able to choose containers that really fit. And I like keeping this one up on the stand just because it's like a picture, you know, it's really fun and inspiring to see. You can also sort all of your findings into tiny containers, and this is a good way to be able to see them too. And it also is another space efficiency thing because all of these things used to live in baggies in a shoebox, and then I squeeze them into this box. Now I have a lot more room on my shelves, so I can stack these up. You can also label all of your containers and make a copy of your label sheet so that you can keep inventory. If you're selling your work, it's really nice to be able to track those product numbers and prices and all that kind of thing. And it helps you keep your boxes organized and labeled so that you know what you have. Another thing to think about is your work surface. So it's nice to have a pad that you can work on. It cushions your hands and it also prevents your beads from rolling around. And it also kind of just keeps your workspace a little bit tidier while you're working. If you can pour some of the contents of your containers out onto the mat and then pick them up with your stringing material, or if you're working with wire, you can just directly go into the holes on those beads and pick them up rather than using a needle even sometimes. And I think we should also talk a little bit about tools. So let's go over an overview of a lot of the tools that you see here on the program. Round nose pliers have conical tips, and what that means is that they taper down to a point, and those are always used for looping. So anytime you're doing looping, this is probably the piece of equipment that people really start out with first when they start to make earrings and do the ends of wire wrapping. You're always working with these kind of round nose pliers, although there are lots of choices now for round noses. Chain nose is kind of a needle nose alternative. It has a smooth jaws inside and they go down to a taper as well. And there are also bent chain nose, which look like this. They have tips that kind of curve upward or outward, and that's really helpful when you're closing loops, either jump rings or loops that you've made on wire. Now, flat nose is just like chain nose with the smooth inside, but it has a squared off tip. And that can be helpful if you want more leverage there at the tip of your pliers, or if you just need to, if you have a larger amount of space, you don't need those pointy little tips to get into it, you can use the flat nose pliers. And then you also want to make sure that you have a cutter. Of course, there are lots of different kinds of cutters, and this is one that you'll see us use a lot on the show. It doesn't have super pointy tips because this is great for cutting all kinds of different material from stringing wire to shaping wire. Now, be sure that you have a variety of crimping tools on hand because crimps come in different sizes. Whether you're using crimp beads or crimp tubes to finish a necklace like this, I used a special finding that also requires a crimping tool. And you will need either the smallest size, the medium size, or the largest size. And most packages of crimps or stringing wire that you see will tell you what size tool you need, but a lot of people don't know that there are some different options in crimping tools. So that will help you finish your jewelry more professionally. Now you'll also want to have some scissors or thread cutters when you're working with cording material like leather, or if you're working with thread. Make sure that you only use these for jewelry making. I know it's really hard not to grab your scissors off your workstation, but these are going to be really sharp and will help you feel more successful the first time that you make your cuts with thread. It's also helpful to have a pair of metal shears. Sometimes when you're working with thicker materials like sheet metal or the metal blanks and you want to trim them to size, or flat wire like this, it's nice to have a heavier duty metal shear. Now there are also some specialty tools that are helpful to have. I'll just get a few out of my bin here. And I like to keep some larger items in a different size bin. So I have a ring mandrel, I have my hammer in here, and it's easy to stash them away then on the shelf when you're done. But some of our specialty tools here are a memory wire cutter. And memory wire cutter works for flat and round memory wire. It makes a really nice clean cut. You can also use a memory wire plier. This is a finishing plier that has cylindrical tips. So this, when it has longer tips, it's called a bail making plier. When it has short tips like this, it's really meant for giving you extra leverage on memory wire. And I also have a flush cutter here. This works for a variety of materials, and it's really perfect because it's perfect to look for tools that have ergonomic handles. So make sure that it's something comfortable that you're going to be using and be comfortable using for a long time. This is our bail making plier. So you can see the difference between the bail making and the memory wire. They're pretty similar. They both have cylindrical tips, but the shorter ones give you good leverage on memory wire. The bigger ones are more for working with shaping wire. And then I also like to keep handy a pair of nylon jaw pliers. And these are just kind of all-purpose for working with shaping wire and opening and closing loops. And even for when you're making wire spirals, it won't make any mars in your wire. So let's take a little look here at some good looping technique. I'm just going to grab some shaping wire here, and I'll show you the difference between working with a round nose plier and the bail making plier. So usually what I would do for a wrapped loop is make that 90-degree angle and then roll my pliers back toward that stem so that you get a nice circle at the top of your wire. So it's kind of that lollipop shape. And I heard somebody once describe this as you're making a little stick person and then you're wrapping the scarf around the person's neck to keep them nice and cozy. And this is where your lighting and magnification is really going to come in handy, because then you can get your coil very tight and close together there. And now here's where you have a couple of options in your cutter. You can use the flush cutter like this. You always want to turn the flat part of the blades against the work so that the part that's cut away is the part that has a little point on it. Now you can also use your bail making pliers to make a loop. And to do that, the process is a little different. You just roll it over the mandrel, and then again, you can hold it with your chain nose pliers and wrap it all the way around. So that's our beading lesson for today.